Hi, I'm Joe Williams, and I was born in Leeds, and I am a heritage worker. I didn't set out for that, but that's what I am. I trained as an actor, so I combined arts with heritage, and I do that because I want to tell positive stories that are currently not so visible in the mainstream. I grew up in the areas of the city centre as well as Hare Hills, and we moved again to another part of Hare Hills that was closer to Chapeltown, so we used to just run across the beck, as we used to say. So the beck was which is a small stream that's just flowing through the area down to Meanwood, where they would, and Sheepscar, where they would do a lot of textile work with the water back in the day. So I played out in Chapeltown a lot, and Chapeltown was like an adventure, a place for adventure, because that's where all the black people were. And I mainly grew up in white areas. And so as an adult, I lived in America for a little while when I was late teens, lived in London for a little while training as an actor. But the rest of my adult life has been in Chapeltown and just really bathing in the culture and the passion that's in the community. Growing up in Leeds for me was quite amazing, really. Just the different worlds that I was introduced to growing up in a multicultural neighborhood. It always gave me a sense of difference and belonging, going to a school that was majority white, but coming from a neighborhood that was quite mixed with people from all over Eastern Europe and Asia, and of course the West Indies. And in those days, it was like a few Africans, mainly students, and then that's changed, and it's brought Leeds more colour with more Africans in the city. But back in the days when I was growing up, things seemed to be in black and white. But I'm currently doing a Zoom presentation with some colleagues on the history of blackface in Britain, which was minstrelsy, where people blacked up and pretended to be black. And it was an entertainment industry that was very lucrative, and it was number one on the radio, number one on television. So I wanted to tackle that, to put into context my growing up and why it was important to challenge that misrepresentation. And I recall going to infants and junior school, a few racial incidents, but nothing that dampened my spirits. But, I was having a conversation, and I do recall seeing, the book Sambo, Little Black Sambo, in the school library. And I was explaining just how strange it is now, reflecting on it, because at the time, I wasn't absorbing the degradation. I saw it as, I'm included, I exist. This is a book about me. And same with Enid Blyton, and, you came across things in there. You got the feeling that, they're not representing black people very well. As a child, I picked that up. But knowing that black people were relatively new to the country, or so I thought, that it would just be a matter of time before it got better. Little did I know. It would take a lot of work and to face a lot of resistance. And so doing the Blackface podcast is to understand that resistance, whereby defining others was a right of empire. And that empire no longer exists. So why are we still holding on to the negative legacies, and what can we do to change that? And so that's why I created Heritage Corner, after graduating from university in 2014, I'd already started the Leeds Black History Walk because it started off with research, wanting to play more positive characters, thinking there must be more positive characters out there, finding out that there is, and then discovering that society wasn't that keen to absorb and take them on. And, you scratch your head. And then so the next question was, why? And then you find out, and so a lot of it's accidental. I'm the youngest of 11 children, with in a family with many, many secrets that I only discovered in my late 30s that have had a significant impact both on my mental health as well as family dynamics. So I grew up in that kind of environment. And then, of course, as you go to school and you realize you're different, then Roots came on and just changed everything. But we're quite lucky in Leeds in a way, because it was a white Leeds writer called Peter Fryer, who wrote a book in the 1980s called Staying Power. And that's like a Bible of Black British history back in the day, obviously influenced by Edward Scobie, a Dominican historian who wrote Black Britannia in the 1950s. But in the 1980s, to get this new release of all these amazing narratives of Black heroes here in Britain, particularly Olaudah Equiano. And you think if society isn't interested in these positive narratives, we have to be. Because it's like they're sending you a signal there's nothing for you to be interested in about your history. You have to turn that around and say, actually, this is where it's at. Growing up, the scenario of the family gathered around the black and white TV, and whenever a black face came on television, it was a cue for hysteria. There would be shouts of Joe Darkie on television, Joe Darkie on television. And everybody would gather around to see a black person. And so you realize that you were underserved as a child growing up, when I witnessed all this excitement around me. Also grew up with gollywogs on the jam jar. Again, it felt like representation. I didn't see it as degrading. It was a cute little gollywog on the jam jar, and it's like, hey, we're visible in society in that way. And so as you grow up, you realize that your visibility is tied to degradation. You're listening to Rastafarians in the community, sharing wisdom and knowledge. Some of it seemed really far-fetched, like, look around you. We build all this, we build this. And then as a child, speaking as I do with an English accent, thinking, how could that be? We weren't even here. He's exaggerating. He needs to stop doing what he's doing. Because all my siblings were born in Jamaica, my mother always told me, Joe, don't talk like your brother and sister. You must talk proper. So, of course, I wanted to please my mum, so I always spoke the Queen's English. And then when I went to drama school as well, they taught what is called received pronunciation. So even today, a lot of people in Chapeltown don't know I'm from Chapeltown. Which, I don't mind that. I don't mind that at all. Identity is a very strange thing. I thought I was going to be accepted by mainstream society because I thought I was doing everything right. And growing up in 1975, there were social uprisings. I wasn't aware of what happened to David Oluwole, but I was aware of him as a young boy, just visibly going through town and seeing this black man looking rough, very rough. Nobody to cream his skin or comb his hair. And I'm sure, I would have asked my mother what happened to him, why was he like that? Because I was used to seeing black people quite well dressed and with, a lot of pride. But we did live near St. George's Crypt in town, in the city centre. And so we did see homelessness a lot, but it was very rare to see a black man. But in 1975, as I was saying, there were social uprisings in Chapeltown, what they called riots. And the way how they talk about it, you'd think that riots were new to Britain, that black people brought rioting to Britain, when Britain has a very rich, shall we say, history of social uprisings or, riots against injustice. And I would like to see that as a combined history rather than as a separate history. But when black people do things, you get the feeling now there's almost like a separation of, oh, well, we don't do that anymore. But they miss out the anymore. We don't behave like that. And as a young 13-year-old, 14-year-old, I knew exactly why the community was uprising, because you hear the stories in the houses, in the homes, and even in church, the injustices. I was aware of young people being picked up and, charged for crimes that they hadn't done. I was also aware of those who were committing crimes, and I was aware of why they were doing it, because I was hungry too. I'd been there where you're looking in the cupboard for what the mice have left for you. You know what I'm saying? So that was a reality. It was like, well, why does it have to be like this? Why are other people suffering? That person's bright and intelligent as that person, why? And you realize that black people aren't in employment, not gaining access to further education. And so, we were standing up for our humanity. I wasn't aware that a lot of other young people basically were saying, we're not going to be the next David Olawale. You're not going to throw us in the river, to be found. And I felt like I was contributing to some kind of change, that things have to change. I wasn't around for the uprisings of 1981, but that was significant. There was the odd occasion of police trailing me as a youngster, I'd say 10 years old, with the police car, and you're looking behind you and you don't know whether you should be looking or not, and they're just creeping up behind you and you're going, what's going on? And that happened a couple of times. And then there was one occasion when I was much older, I think I was about 18, and they rolled down the window and made some comment that I didn't understand. I think they were saying something like, are you up from the smoke? Meaning, am I from London? Or maybe they were saying something else about smoke, I don't know. But because I responded, I'm sorry, officer, can I help you? In my best English accent. They just thought boring, rolled up the window and drove away. I wasn't who they were looking for. But that really then made me, think about what my siblings had to go through with their Jamaican accent, because that was seen, having a Jamaican accent was seen as defiant and obstructive. And so they were given a much harder time. So I learned a lot about injustice from my brothers and sisters, leaving school, what they had to go through. One brother was hired by an engineering firm, and he had to get in something like 5 o'clock in the morning to light the fire for other workers coming in. And the penny dropped for him when he trained about his 6th or 7th young white worker, who then stepped above him in terms of promotion. So perhaps it was to do with the fact that I knew I was different, but I didn't know why. But I got attracted to the arts, and I attended a high school which was for the arts, which was about 8 miles away. So I traveled about 8 miles there, 8 miles back every day. But yeah, that was fantastic, and that gave me an escape. Being in the arts, I was very fortunate, as I said, because then I had good friends who, regardless of what was going on, helped me. There was an Asian family that I was very good friends with both boys. We went to school together, and their mother basically adopted me, being Sikh, very welcoming, and food is the key point of communication. So as soon as I walked in the door, I'll make you some food. Not, are you hungry? Not, do you want something to eat? I'll make you some food. And it's put down in front of you whether you want it or not. And you eat it or leave it. It's up to you. And hey, I think I was there every day. Friends, community, that helps you through. And of course, my siblings, they were helping me in a kind of, I suppose, a patronizing way. But they encouraged me to be a personality that wasn't real. But as long as I was that person, then they would love me. So I kept being that person. And I'm only just now beginning to let that person go, because it's a big burden to carry when it's really nothing to do with you. And somebody actually advised me to go and see a therapist. But that filled me with fear because I didn't know what it is I wanted to talk about before I was told. I didn't have a clue. So I didn't want to go to a therapist not knowing and then being, treated with prescription drugs and whatever the therapy might have been. So I knew that was an option. But I knew that I would wait until things got just too unbearable before then having to submit to that. But if I did know when I was younger, if they told me when I was 18 or 21, which I think would have been the right time, not before and certainly not after, I would have gone to therapy to help me through those issues. In my late 30s, that's the first thing I did. When I was told, I had sessions with a therapist in London because I was living in London at the time. And I only needed 6 because once I got onto a track of a better way of thinking, then I could sort a lot of the things out myself. So that therapist was very good in just giving me tools for this, toolbox to fix the problem, which 20 odd years later, I realized it's not an instantly solvable problem, but you just make it part of your way of life, that you're learning and reflecting, resolving issues as you go. But when you have the downs, the ups are just absolutely amazing. The fact that my personal history was hidden and my social history was hidden, and growing up in the family as somebody who aimed to please, being the only British born meant that I was there to help to fill out forms and to write letters, in good English and not patois. So always trying to be helpful. So that feeds into my community spirit and approach. But when I was about 13, attending Intake High School for the Performing Arts, I did an audition for the old Leeds Playhouse, and I got the part. And it was an 18th century play, and the casting director showed the director my picture, and I'd already got the part, but the director said, well, we can't use him because there wouldn't have been black people in the 18th century. I later found out that the playwright was an abolitionist, which the director, if he had done his research, should have known. But my headmaster, bless him, took it upon himself to go to the talk to the director and say, you're wrong there, mate. There was plenty of black people in London at this time. And so then I was put back in. And then that, I just loved it. Loved the theatre, working with professional actors. So that steered my career. But that was 40 years ago, more than 40 years ago. And I'm still waiting for historical black British figures to be part of mainstream society because they contributed immensely to developing mainstream society, culture, wealth, and Britain's social development. So that's still work in progress. It's almost like there's been too much, in the view of some people, empathy directed at Africans. And Africa is still being exploited economically today. So it's in somebody's interests not to boost the empathy of Africans, but to have them seen as subjects of Britain rather than independent-minded spirits. So in our education system, our young people are being taught basically that African civilization has only come about as a result of European contact, instead of being aware of the fact that African civilizations influenced the birth of Western civilizations, including going back to ancient Greece. You can see why they don't want to see that aspect of the narrative, but it doesn't mean that we have to. I don't want to force anybody to see things that they don't want to see. But we, as black people, have to see ourselves as ancient beings with a wealth of wisdom sewn into the fabric of our genetics, going back many thousands of years, because we didn't write things down. We lived it. We didn't read about it. We didn't need to write about it. We lived it. It was rich. For me, first and foremost, some people say, local hero. I can see that. But that was never my intention. My intention was to try to sort out the tangled threads in my head that I couldn't make sense of. But I knew that engaging positively with my culture and heritage would help that. Hopefully help to heal that. So when I created Leeds Black History Walk, it was for me. It was for me, to do, not to have to audition and be rejected and then get accepted and play another mugger, on Crime Watch. It's like, because that, when you're playing one negative role after another, it really gets to your mental health, and I was already in a place where I couldn't take anymore, so I knew I had to engage with something positive. I did a lot of theatre in education in my career as an actor, so that's my background. And whenever I mentioned, as a topic for the next play, what about the slave trade? It was important to Britain. Whoa, got a lot of resistance, and these are liberal people. Regardless of the subject of that, what you're taking in, that's what young people are looking at, the real dynamics. And so when slavery kept on getting pushed back, I realized that, all right, there's a lot of paranoia. People see it as a trigger. If you talk about slavery, then people will riot. And I just felt there was too much education, too many lives that had contributed so much to British society just being swept under the carpet and ignored. And knowing that the degradation can be damaging to the image, the representation of degradation can be damaging to the mental health of young people, that they needed something positive of reference to their culture and identity, but then also realizing that in wider society, if you don't invest in your own narrative, then you're investing in somebody else's narrative. Especially if it's degrading, then it just keeps you doing it, and you pass that on to your children and they do it. And I just grew up in a community where I knew the impact of negative self-image. And people like Arthur France, the Leeds West Indian Carnival founder, he's a champion of black heroes and positive self-image and, strength in self-confidence. And so the community inspired me. There was he was a young man at the time, before he passed away, sadly, Elton Lewis, after the social uprisings, fought to create a youth center for the young people. And he was in despair about its survival and sadly took his own life. He had his own issues, and I think it's people who have issues, have problems, who have the tenacity and the energy to help to create change. So, no matter what you're going through, your energies and your experience can contribute to something that's of use. So, realizing the resistance, I worked with a theatre company in Sheffield in 2005. I'm not sure if they're still going, but they were the only ones that were prepared to help me to adapt an African narrative into a speech. And that was Dead Earnest Theatre in Sheffield. And so I'm really, really grateful to them for taking the time, because I just used to talk to all my friends about Black history and being excluded, and and that passion came from the passion of not knowing my own story. So it was tied up with that kind of psychosis in a way. And so people got fed up listening to Joe Williams talk about Black British history, but not doing anything about it. So that narrative, when I saw the reaction to people in doing this narrative in a theatre and education style of, information and bringing people in to explore issues, it's been phenomenal. And so I wanted other young people to have that experience of knowing that there's something in them that is heroic and rich. Yes, the funding not being there has always been an issue. Arthur France started a community group in 2005 which we called the Leeds Bicentenary Transformation Project, and that was to prepare to get ready for 2007. So me and Arthur talked in 2005, because I wrote an article that we shouldn't be ashamed about, for a community magazine, that we shouldn't be ashamed to talk about slavery, because a lot of Black people are. And I was saying this is the reason why we shouldn't be ashamed. So Arthur came to talk to me, and we said, okay, let's start something. And he just, with his, personality, made it happen. And the Leeds Bicentenary Transformation Project did a funding application to the Heritage Lottery and received £400,000. That was for a 4-year project, so £100,000 a year. Excuse me. We could employ staff and do projects. And the Leeds Black History Walk is a legacy of the Leeds Bicentenary Transformation Project, because we'd invited international speakers and done a lot of research into local history, had partnerships with schools and universities and heritage venues like the Leeds Museum, the Leeds Library, and we had amassed all this rich information, which as one of the final projects, bringing it to a close in 2009, I said, I'll create a walk. It has received great acclaim, received an award from 10 Downing Street. I've been awarded an honorary fellowship to the Trinity University here in Leeds. And so I know that it's well received. But again, it's still a long way to go before we get a Black British figure that's accepted in the mainstream. The significance of that is that I always felt that the Windrush generation, before the 75th anniversary, it was just a struggle getting recognition. It was like, I felt at one time in the 90s that Britain wanted to erase the history, and the Windrush scandal under Theresa May proves that, which is why I got the award from 10 Downing Street to make up for it, as a part of making up for it. You always have to see things in perspective.